Uberti Cattleman 1873 Colt Single Action Army Old West Edition. Hey, this is the Range Running. Stay tuned and I will tell you all about it. So there I was, in a local gun shop a long time ago. I was perusing the display cases for a possible new firearm. Many pistols and revolvers were scanned, with drilling lips and leering eyes, but nothing appealed to me. The last display case contained several Uberti Single Action clones, which I was not into at that time. That was soon to change. Between a Cattleman 5.5-inch and 7.5-inch barreled versions, Schofield Russian model, and a pair of 1873 single-action Cattleman El Patron new models, my eyes at first passed by, but then snapped back. One revolver was telling me, "You need me." Sure enough, I felt that I did. The Uberti Cattleman 1873 Colt Single Action Army Old West Edition was destined to become the first Uberti reproduction, of which has led to many other Uberti reproductions in both percussion and cartridge models. Why the Uberti Cattleman 1873 Colt Single Action Army Old West Edition came to be? Well, I will explain that when I get to the features, but first, the basic specifications. The Uberti Old West Edition of the 1873 Colt Single Action Army Revolver reproduction has many features, with the first and foremost being the finish. Let's ponder on that finish a bit. When we think of Old West finishes, we usually equate that with many years of handling, shooting, and holster wear that established a firearm's patina, an appearance or aura that is derived from association, habit, or established character. Uberti, at some point, decided that through modern means, a finish that somewhat duplicates many years of handling, shooting, and holster wear would be a good selling point. Well, it was, at least to me. You see, the Single Action Army was most widely produced with a color-cased hardened frame and blued barrel. Meanwhile, a nickel-plated version was issued to Indian Scouts, and a bright charcoal blue finish was available from the factory. But with many years of use, the old six guns took on a well-handled, soft, gray patina. Uberti uses a modern process that accelerates and reproduces, as closely as possible, this well-handled, soft gray patina that is very striking. But Uberti did not stop there. What would a revolver look like with a finish like this and have new grips mounted on it? Pretty silly looking, to say the least. Uberti went so far as to subject the grips to the same process to, also, give them the aged appearance that matches up with many years of handling, shooting, and handwear associated with such a revolver. How did Uberti manage to do all this? Through some research, I found that the parts to be finished like this all went through a tumbling process with tiny bits of actual metal. Too much tumbling, and the finish would be very short of acceptable, as would too little tumbling. Comparing an authentic and well-worn Colt Single Action Army and the Uberti reproduction of, I would say that Uberti hit it pretty close. Not exact, but that's to be expected, as the Uberti's Old West finish is artificially produced. Now, let me move on to the rest of the revolver. The front end of the revolver exhibits that all too familiar sail of a front sight atop a nicely crowned barrel with a big hole in the center that says, "I'm open for business." The manufacturer's information can be seen on the top of the barrel, with model and caliber seen on the left side of the barrel. Mod 1873, Cal 45 Colt. Attached beneath the 5.5-inch barrel is the ejector rod housing, ejector rod spring, and ejector rod. It ends with a nice button for the finger to push when ejecting shells when needed. Just below that on the front of the frame is the cylinder rod, also called the base pin, and just below that is the base pin retention screw. You notice that I did not say base pin retention button. The original 1873 Colt Single Action Army base pin was originally held in place by a screw. The push-in, spring-loaded type retention button was added later in 1890, which was prior to the second-generation Colts that were produced from 1956 to 1974, thus the reason for the old model cylinder pin retention assignment by Uberti. The unit serial number can be found under the frame at the front. There are no markings on the right side of the frame, but the patent information can be found on the left side. Pat, September 19, 1871, and Pat, July 2, 1872. Moving up from the frame, there is a nicely finished cylinder that holds 6 of those 45 Colt Go poppy seeds, although carrying only 5 with the hammer down on an empty chamber is the way to go for this revolver. There is just a hint of fore and aft cylinder free play, with about as much of a hint of side-to-side free play. This revolver is built tight. The cylinder to forcing cone gap, the flash gap, is measuring out at 7/1000ths of an inch, and is within acceptable limits. It should be needless to say to keep all digits away from this gap, but I guess that I did anyway. The top strap is the typical Colt type with integrated and narrow sight channel, and trust me when I say that the very narrow front sight is hard to see when aiming. Cylinder movement is very smooth when cocking the hammer through the 4 Colt clicks, as this model has, just like the original. Of course, the hammer positions are rest, first quarter cock notch, that some consider a safety notch, but should never be used as such, a second notch that is used for loading and unloading the cylinder, a pass-through notch that sets the trigger, and the 4th and final full cock notch. If you are familiar at all with Colt Single Action Army revolvers, or reproductions such as this one, you should never attempt to pull the trigger into quarter cock or half cock hammer positions, as this will damage the revolver. The hammer is always pulled to the full cock position, at which you can decide if the revolver is to be fired or decocked. Safely decocking with chambers loaded can be done using the thumb and finger pinch method, or the old cowboy method, just using the thumb of the shooting hand. The former is preferred over the latter, for better safety. Loading up 6 snap caps, it was time to check out the trigger. Snap caps allow you to dry fire the revolver without worrying about damaging the revolver's firing pin, which is mounted loosely in the hammer. As the hammer drops forward after pressing the trigger, the conical firing pin slides nicely into a chamfered hole in the frame and continues forward, striking the primer of a cartridge. Snap caps simply give the firing pin something soft to impact. The hammer, with its high and serrated spur, pulls through those 4 Colt clicks like butter. Of course, to drop the hammer from the full cock position, the trigger must be pulled. The trigger is a highly curved and thin affair, which is housed within the very nicely rounded trigger housing. Just like with the original, there is adequate space within the trigger guard to accommodate a gloved trigger finger. However, with this revolver, it is best not to use a gloved trigger finger, as the trigger pull weight measured in at a very sensitive 1 pound 0.8 ounces with a 5-pull average. This is one very light trigger, and trigger finger discipline is definitely needed during live fire. This trigger can sneak up on you really quick if you don't pay attention. You would love the 2-piece grip panels. Not only was the finish of the revolver given the Old West treatment, the walnut grip panels were as well, most excellently fitted to the grip frame. The grip panels just exude the feeling that they have been gripped many times by worn and calloused hands of a cowboy, lawman, or gunfighter. Nope, they just look that way, and complete the Old West look of the revolver. In case you didn't know, the grip frame of the 1873 Colt Single Action Army duplicated that found on the Colt Army Model 1860, a cap and ball .44 caliber single action revolver. Aside from the Colt Bisley revolver, which had a longer and inward curved grip frame, and in my personal opinion, the grip frame of the 1873 Colt Single Action Army is the most comfortable to grip. The top curve of the grip positions the hand high and closer to the bore axis of the revolver, while keeping the thumb of the shooting hand as close to the hammer spur as possible. In full cock, the hammer spur just nestles nicely into the web of the hand, and allows all non-firing digits to be kept on the grip. The rear arch of the grip frame just pulls nicely into the palms of the shooting hand. I think that I have covered all of the features, but will probably add more with comments during the range session. But first, I do need to mention something. As was mentioned earlier, base pin retention is with a screw, rather than a spring-loaded base pin retention button that is found on most single-action revolvers of today's time. This screw needs to be checked occasionally during live fire, as it could walk out or even be lost after doing so. Uberti, in their anticipation of such happening, provided an extra screw for convenience. I would also caution about over-tightening the screw after performing maintenance and reassembling the revolver. Tighten the screw just finger tight. Tightening using a screwdriver could lead to over-torquing of the screw, which could lead to breaking of the screw, which could lead to a trip to a gunsmith to fix. Just a precautionary word, that's all. At this point, let me take you to the range. Located inside of the Charlie Elliott Wildlife Center, located just south of Mansfield, Georgia, is the Clybell Shooting Range. It has an excellent outdoor handgun range with multiple steel targets that present many challenges. With distances from 17 yards to 35 yards, we have swinging plates, shooting trees, stationary steel targets, and a couple of swing-out targets to play with. This is the second time to a range with the Old West, with the first being my favorite indoor gun club and range for the initial run-in. The Old West has been in storage ever since, until now. I am on my favorite green lane today, and this one always presents me with a challenge. First up is to determine point of aim. Knowing that these single-action revolvers have a tendency to shoot high, with a very thin front sight, a thin sight channel in which to view that very thin front sight, poor eyesight, and with old and shaky hands, there should be enough demands on me to perform well with the Old West. In other words, perfect. Let's get to it.
Light is amazing, bro. We love this dollar. How much you pay for that? Thank you for coming. I'll see you next time. When you come here, you can shoot your 22 anywhere you want. But it's the most fun. Real life fun. How do you do? No, so what you want to do is take your rifle and your pistol, just like you're bring the case all the way to the table. But yeah, see the target. So there you just go like 3 inches up. You're very welcome. Yeah. You? Always hot. Always hot. But I still like that. And the bullets is mad small. With that long.
I put this on here.
Oh, you
Off the
don't
market. I mean, this is like $10.
And it's better.
It is a decoration. Yeah.
You see that? Is yours? You go right. That's yours? Oh, I didn't know that. I didn't finish all yours. You got trigger head.
Yeah, you like it. I know. First time I said it. That's a real bro.
It looks like a hair. Like I thought it was hair off.
Yeah.
So you could be wrong.
Bigger, yeah.
Yeah, revolver.
So, there you have it. Specifications, features, and range time with the Uberti 1873 Colt Single Action Army reproduction in an Old West finish. Pretty cool, right? Excellent handling characteristics with its 5.5-inch barrel, a trigger to die for on a 1911, very good accuracy once you figure out what the Old West is telling you, and a source for conversation at the range with fellow shooters. An interesting historical side note. From 1874 to at least 1945, Colt provided instructions that stated that the revolver was to be carried with all 6 chambers loaded, and with the hammer on the safety notch. Colt's advertisements in the 1920s through 1945, after which the first-generation single-action armies were discontinued, instructed that the revolver may be carried cocked with the hammer in the safety notch. However, this line of thinking was amended after the redesigned second-generation single-action army, whereas a sharp blow could damage the redesigned half-cock mechanism and allow a fully loaded revolver to fire. Regardless of being criticized by some, I only load 5 in these reproductions of the 1873 and earlier Colt revolvers, just for my own peace of mind. Also, the original 1873 Colt Single Action revolver's frame finish was color case hardened, with some being finished in what is now called San Francisco blue. The color case hardened frame would, over time, wear, and exposure, turn a flat gray color. Still fully functional, just not eye-appealing. The finish of the Old West, although artificially made, make for a striking appearance, mottled in some areas while smooth in others. Uberti, as I am told, actually used a well-worn original 1873 Colt Single Action Army revolver to serve as a source for the finish. As I said in the beginning, I think Uberti did an excellent job. Well, I have taken you on quite a journey. Sadly, at least for me, it has to end. I hope that you continue watching the channel, as I hope to continue growing with more review videos. Until the time that we do meet again, take care of yourself, and stay vigilant, armed, and safe out there.